This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Good morning, Kelly.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm on like a cup and a half of coffee, so
I'm finishing my second quart.
My second quart. That's ridiculous.
It depends on perspective.
Your heart rate must be...
Well, let's see.
Strong.
my heart rate is usually pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. You got a watch that actually can calculate that.
Yeah, so do you.
I don't think mine does the...
I think it does.
Oh, it does the heart rate. It doesn't do the oxygen.
Yeah.
My dad has one where you can actually do the oxygen level.
I'm actually a little high right now for me. So,
go figure. I wonder why.
But it's 70.
That's your heart rate?
My heart rate is 70 per minute. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'm usually in the mid to upper 50s.
Is that like good for... My light just died on me. Now I have a brown background now.
You do?
I don't. It had like a full battery. I don't know what just happened to it. Whatever. I'll rock with it. Is that like normal?
So normal is between...
For someone of like your age and size.
What are you saying about the size? Why is that?
Because you have to calculate that in.
No, you don't. Because there's so many variables. Size is weight-wise, maybe.
That's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Nicely.
But as much as I weigh, I'm still in pretty good shape for somebody my age. The average heart rate is between 60 and 80. Your heart rate is considered high when you start reaching the upper 70s, low 80s.
You mean so like having a heart rate of like almost 150 isn't good?
It depends on what you're doing. If you're just sitting there and you're resting and it's 150, no. But if you're running a marathon and it's 150, that's probably expected.
When I had pneumonia, I would walk across my living room and my heart rate went up to 150. That was pretty interesting. I could like actually feel my heart like actually beating like really hard, and I was like, oh, okay, this is not great.
Yeah, self-admittedly, I'm a little overweight, but I still exercise most days. I played pickleball this morning.
Wow. I tell you, that must be exhausting. I watch people play pickleball, and it's like, I feel like I'd get winded really quick.
When I first saw it, I thought, this is going to be the easiest game ever. It's like gigantic ping pong is what I thought it was going to be like, but it is tougher than it looks. But it's also, from my perspective, I thought it was going to be kind of a dull game. I used to play tennis a wee bit, but I got bored with it. And I thought it was going to be kind of like tennis for old people. So they didn't have to run as much, but it is a pretty good game especially for me, because I'm pretty competitive.
I would have never guessed that.
Really? Yeah, so it addresses that. I have an outlet for that. But when I play with my wife, I have to kind of
tone it down a little bit.
Throttle it back a little bit. Yeah.
You take it easy. Come on.
I don't, but I don't smash it either. I use more finesse and work on my finesse shots, they call them dinks, the little bink placement, as opposed to speed.
All right. Well,
hey, Ethan, what kind of mug do I have?
Gosh, it looks like a ceramic. I think, is that your T-Rex mug? Your dinosaur mug?
But it's a left-handed mug.
Oh, yeah, it's left-handed. For the 16 what is it, 16% of people in the world that are left-handed?
Yeah, but
Something like that.
I think we look at it different from a marketing perspective. We want the logo facing out. I think most people want to look at the logo facing them, whatever that is, the image or whatever. What are we talking about today? All right, enough about us and our heart rates.
Hey, it's all educational and informational stuff. So I think we're going to continue talking about bus safety, but a little bit more in detail about the technology that you would need to actually make that happen. So I guess I'll start off with, I always try to find news articles that we can talk about, and I couldn't really find anything within the last week, so I try to keep it current. But the one that I did see, but I couldn't open it because I needed a subscription to actually read it, so couldn't read the whole thing. But the title was something to the effect of, do cameras that show the outside of the bus, so they would show cars that would go by the stop sign illegally when it's deployed, does that actually increase the student's safety?
Do you want to answer that first, or you want me to answer it?
I was gonna have a little pause for our listeners to think about it, but now you've probably thought about it. So the answer is no.
Why?
It's just going to record the event, just like any other camera that doesn't have any other preventative AI type stuff on there. It's just an evidence taker.
Yeah,
is what it is.
You're going to record
what you're going to record the make and model of the car, maybe the license plate. Depending on the quality of camera, you might even get like a visual of the driver, whatever, right? So it's like, that's all it's going to do.
There's no mechanism for that camera to stop the action.
Right.
So if there's no mechanism for that, then I don't right now. Well, there is technology out there, but I don't know if it could be deployed quickly enough. Maybe it could. Theoretically, I don't think this is on the marketplace. So theoretically, if you had AI attached to a camera that was in the rear of the bus and or the front of the bus, and if that camera had AI attached to it that read the distance and the speed of the car.
I like where you're going with this already.
And then if it surpassed the parameters of distance and speed, then it deploys a spike strip. Right?
You just you could have said anything else and you went to like the one of the extremes.
So that's how law enforcement stops pursuits. They get somebody out ahead of the pursuit. They deploy a spike strip.
I already have a brand name for this already. You want to know what it's called? It's called the Karma Strip.
The Karma Strip. Yep, there you go.
There you go. No one else. I've already said it, so you guys can't take my.
Yeah. So CAR.
Yeah, the
Karma Strip. So then it runs over the spike strip, and the spikes are like large gauge needles. So they have it pointed in, but they're hollow, and they get embedded in the wheels and deflate the wheels.
Oh, wow. You really thought about that. Wow.
It's something that's used all the time in law enforcement.
I had no idea that's how they were made.
It's just an adaptation of something that is already being used. The issue is that it would likely not stop.
Slow it down a little bit. Slow it down. Not in time.
Right. And it probably wouldn't happen in time. The other technology that's out there that would be the same, theoretically, is essentially an EMP that fries the electronics in the engine of the car and stops it from operating. Again, I don't think it would stop the momentum from going quick enough.
You know what? The other thing you could do, you ever see those things where I think it's something that's on the front of a car, on maybe a police car, where they have like it's like a netting that's on the front, and it deploys and it sits on the ground, and they get out underneath the back wheels, and it goes, and then like instantly locks up the tires, so it just wraps up. You need something like that.
Yeah. So again, that's technology. The interesting thing about that is a guy that actually worked with me and for me helped develop that.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
I think that he's retired, and I think that's what he's doing now is that. But he was instrumental in the initial design and concept of that. But again, you have to get that situated just right, and whether or not it would actually work, I don't know. Cameras do not stop something from happening. I always go through this sort of analogy is if cameras were preventative, we would no longer have any bank robberies.
Yep.
People would not cheat at cards in Las Vegas. They do it all the time.
Why do we have this issue in the first place? Because like buses right now, they have a stop sign that flips out.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, they have little lights on them. Sometimes they don't. Depends on how old they are, I guess. But
Yeah.
yet we're still looking for solutions to protect the kids coming off the bus from getting hit by a car
Mm-hmm.
that's supposed to be stopping.
Mm-hmm.
Are we like,
Why do we have accidents on the roadway? Why do we some of it's distracted driving, some of it's impatience, some of it's just stupidity. There's all kinds of reasons for, but we're dealing with humans. As intelligent as we are, we're not that bright. We do stupid things.
Sometimes smart people make dumb decisions.
Sure, right? And they get impatient and they run around, and then all of a sudden a kid darts out because the kid and the bus driver thinks everyone's stopping at the stop sign that's flashing and the red lights that are flashing on all over the bus.
There's lights flashing on the top lights. There's lights flashing here. The stop lights are flashing. And
frankly, I don't know what the answer to that is other than slow down, be patient.
Like a kid's life is worth way more than anything that you have to get to.
Yes, that ultimately that's true, and that's why you should stop. But the other part of that is you're likely going to spend some time in jail.
Yeah.
So
probably like, do you think you'd spend time in jail even if you didn't hit the kid? Like, what if you just nearly missed them?
it depends on the jurisdiction, but my feelings are that it's running a stop sign, a school stop sign, so it's probably a little bit more as opposed to just a four-way stop sign in a neighborhood. You're stopping for a specific reason is because of the danger of the kid running out. So my feelings are that it's a little bit more serious, maybe a misdemeanor, so it might come with the potential of jail time. But the reality is you're likely not going to spend time unless you hurt or killed someone.
Do you think that we would see a reduction in these events if we like increase that risk? Like, what if we said if you run a school bus stop sign, it's this fine, this many months or whatever in jail? Do you think we'd see less of it?
Yeah, just give them a weekend or whatever. Just the first one, the second one, they
just have give them a weekend to go to jail and just have someone just slapping them upside the head. Be like, what were you thinking?
Yeah. Well, I wish we could do that, but obviously we can't. But it's one of those things that,
blows my mind.
I
don't even understand why it's an issue. It's crazy.
There's no answer for it, right? If people are going to do stupid things, they're going to do stupid things. There's little that society can do about it. Hopefully they don't, but we can't make laws that prevent those kind of actions if somebody's intent on violating them for whatever reason. We're talking about school shootings, violence all the time. There's laws against it. In some states, you could get the death penalty for that. Most states, you could spend the rest of your life in prison for that. Yet they still do it.
I guess my first question, are there any preventative technologies out there for school buses? Or do we only currently have the response technologies?
So it depends on the perspective, right? And where you're coming at it and what you're doing, kind of, right? And how you define preventative. So I'm going to say, yes, there are technologies that are preventative. If they're used correctly, if people are trained correctly on those use and what it means. So let me give you two examples. If you had cameras with AI attached to it layered on top of your existing cameras that had weapons and gun detection, then there is that potential. If something were to be seen by the cameras, then you would be able to prevent that from occurring, because it would be verified, an alert would go out, you would be notified right away, and you could take a proactive preventative action if that's what you were trained to do, and knew how to do that, right? The other issues are like, if you have, let's say, I'm going to call it access control or visitor management on a bus. So you have a list of kids that are supposed to be on a particular bus, and they have ID that they have to scan to get onto that bus. Or the bus driver, let's say they're younger kids and they don't have IDs, or they forget them, because kids are going to be kids, they lose them or whatever. There's a manual override where the bus driver knows who that is and they get on. If somebody were to try to get on and they didn't have the right credentials, they would theoretically be prevented from going on that bus. And if that person was meaning to do harm to somebody on that bus, and they were prevented from getting onto that bus, then you've prevented that harm from occurring. And so we hear about it all the time. Some people get on the bus not to complete an act of mass violence, but they're targeting a specific somebody who wronged them, right?
Could be a minor bullying thing.
Yeah, or
to something more extreme, but
yeah. Or, I'm just like, it happened thousands of times when I was growing up. Kids just got angry with each other and got into fights, and they targeted each other either right after school or on their way home or whatever, right? Those things happen. But if you prevent, or let's take the positive side of that, you only allow those who are supposed to be on that bus, then there's that preventative angle to that. Currently, we don't have metal detectors on buses. We don't have weapons detectors on buses, generally speaking. It would be tough to do. You could configure it to where you could do it, i.e., you have to get into a line, and in order to get physically onto the bus, you have to pass through. I mean, we're freshly back from Florida, and we are, as we always do when we go to Florida, Kayla takes us to either Universal City Walk or Disney Springs or what have you. And in order to access that sort of area, we have to walk through either a weapons detection or a metal detector, understanding the distinction of both are different. Metal detector is not, all it's doing is detecting metal. A weapons detection is dealing with density and bringing densities into question, so that it could theoretically, I don't know how that technology all works, but supposedly it's able to say that person has a gun. Not only that it's metal, but it's a gun or a knife or something other than, theoretically, if it's something like, many police batons are made out of a high density polymer. So they would not signal a metal detector, but a weapons detection should detect that.
That's a good point. It's interesting.
So theoretically, if you configure that, the biggest issue is you have so many buses and they're coming through at different times, going different places, but it's not impossible. You could configure a way to send people through a detection device before they actually got on the bus.
So you're saying have it be external to the bus,
on the sidewalk before they take
on the sidewalk, so that way, like, you're not putting a whole bunch of money into each individual bus. You just have the one thing that they basically come up to.
Yep.
And people have
okay. That's what I would do.
That idea.
That's what I would do.
Smart.
The issue comes into, and we've talked about this before with metal detectors and such. For every toy that you're using, you have to have somebody to play with that toy.
Yeah.
You can't just sit there. Metal detectors are a perfect example of that. You can't just let people walk through and not have somebody there who starts searching people when there's a detection. There's no point in that. It renders the device useless.
You can't just have a metal
Ineffective.
detector just to say, oh, we got metal detectors, so your kids are safe.
Well, I think it was a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago now, that when we first started doing the podcast, there was a school that was using metal detectors, and they stopped using them because they kept going off all the time. They unplugged them and they said these things are ridiculous. They don't, and no one has a gun, not one, but they're going off all of the time. All of these false alarms. It's not false alarms. You're talking about metal spirals on backpacks. You're talking about belt buckles. You're talking about in the 3-ring binders, that metal clips that come in. You're talking about cell phones and things like that.
Mm.
You I mean, you go into a sporting event and you have to take everything out of your pocket, and everything in a backpack or whatever gets searched, and then you walk through to make sure you're not concealing any metal. You can't just say, okay, run through, and if it goes off and starts beeping, you have to have somebody there who's trained in the use and the purpose and who understands what that beep means, right? So, yeah, because I think there was an article or a question that came out: do metal detectors make your school safe?
They can make your school safer if they're used correctly.
Correctly. Mm-hmm. And if you have somebody who understands how to play with that toy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just let someone run through it and hear a beep and go, okay, you're good.
That's correct. Beep, beep.
It only made a short beep, so
You know,
I like
there's
that idea though, having like a little spot on the sidewalk or something. But then you'd have to like account for like us in the north regions. You'd have to have some way to protect it from snow and rain.
you have
And
to do it anyway, right?
I mean, metal detectors are usually on the inside of a building, right? So
Well, how about the one in Florida was, I guess it was undercover, so you could put a
yeah,
little kiosk or something that you walk
little
through.
cabana
Little
thing, But
little
I like that idea. That's pretty good.
it would work.
When you've got, let's say you have this is kind of slightly going a different direction.
Okay.
You kind of brought it up about, let's say you have a fight on a bus,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously you're the driver. Let's say you're the driver of the bus, and you're driving down the road, and this fight starts breaking out. Like, are you pulling over and addressing the fight? Are you just like turning your head and saying like cut it out and hoping that they listen to you? Do they have like what is there? What can we do here to limit the bullying?
Yeah, it's all escalation, right, of your actions. Hey, stop it. And if they don't, maybe another one, second time, third time, maybe you're pulling over and intervening, right? So,
Okay,
but you know,
it sounds like you're getting into kind of what we talked about before about how your bus drivers need to be trained.
right, right. So,
You can't just be some, like, let's say you're got a high school kids beating on each other, and you got some petite bus driver. Like, how do you handle that?
well, that's how, I mean, petite people handle things, physical things all the time. So it's understanding the expectation and what you're supposed to do. But you also have to understand
Mm,
that bus drivers have more responsibility than just being an Uber driver in a big yellow bus, right?
yeah.
They have more responsibility to intervene. They have more responsibility to care for. So this gets back to what we talked about a little bit last week, or on the last podcast, on the overview of bus safety, where buses are essentially an extension of the classroom.
Yeah,
So
they're like a mobile
mobile class,
classroom.
yeah, they have, and sometimes kids are on those buses for longer than they are in a single class. So some of these bus rides are an hour plus, depending on, if they're rural or not, right? So it's an extension of the classroom. So everything that happens at the school happens on a class or on a bus, right? So having that technology available, whatever you have in your classrooms, you should extend to the bus. In addition to that, your teachers need to be trained on how to intervene with physical altercations, right? So they need to understand how to intervene, de escalate things, and work through those types of situations while they're on the bus. And so when we're talking about technology, it's not just the radio to say, hey, I have a problem here. It's right. Are we putting panic buttons on buses? Are we putting Wi-Fi on buses? Are we really actually treating our buses as extensions or temporary mobile classrooms where they have one person in charge? Maybe they have an assistant. I've heard recently that there are schools that are placing an extra adult on the buses for the purpose of controlling the kids on the buses, because we're in a different time and place than when I went to school, where you sat in your seat and you didn't even turn around before somebody was yelling at you, right?
Social media, internet
Whatever the reason is,
just killed us.
we have less control over our youth than we used to, right? Whether that's good or bad is not the part of this conversation. What is part of it is how that impacts school and bus safety. So it's very difficult for a bus driver to drive this huge machine at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour through our communities and control all of the kids on the bus with any effectiveness. So
Yeah.
in many cases, this isn't technology, but it is one of those things that schools are doing. They're adding, assistants. I don't know what they call them, but they're adding assistants to help control that. But
I like that idea.
yeah, I mean, it seemed like a good idea. It costs more money, but I think it's a necessary expense. I think that's a pretty good idea. Of course, you have to understand what your culture is in your area and how that might be impacted. But when you're talking about kids that are on the bus and it's an extension of the classrooms, there are kids, good kids, on these buses that are using that hour or so time to catch up on their homework, to maybe read a little bit, maybe look at their assignment, maybe work through it. And in order for them to effectively manage their time, you need Wi Fi. Wi Fi also on the buses. This is not new technology. It's been on
No.
it's been on buses for many, many years, especially like Greyhound buses or tour buses. It's been on for many, many years. So the technology's there, but having the ability to connect and do your homework or whatever, to me, it seems like a good use of that technology. Additionally, there are more and more that are adding cameras, and whether or not they think it's
To the
preventive
inside
to the
or the outside?
inside and or as the kids get on, those types of things. I think you will see, generally speaking, right now, I believe most of the cameras are from the bus drivers, almost like a rear view mirror perspective. They're just looking
Sure.
back over and seeing. But we talked about this in the last podcast where there's not necessarily seatbelts in all of the buses, but their seats are higher. So if the seats are higher, that also limits the bus driver's
Right.
view of what.
You can see like their head, maybe the top of their head. You need like cameras like up in the ceiling that like point straight down, and then you can actually see.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was trending to,
I
going to
stole it
allude
right
to,
from you.
is your that's all right. That means you're learning, little Padawan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're going to start seeing more and more cameras with more and more views. And as part of that, your transportation professionals, law enforcement, in some cases, are going to want access to that real time, right?
Mm.
So if you hit a button, that says I'm having an issue on my bus and I have to pull over to address this issue, somebody's going to respond, okay, do you need me to send somebody? Or they're going to press a link on the camera to see what's happening. And they may make a decision to report or call 911 when you're unable to because you're attending to the actual situation, right?
Like you could probably, this might apply to like the larger districts because they'd have the bandwidth to do it. But you could have it where you'd have your security team, and they've got a wall of TVs and monitors or whatever that show your cameras on the inside of a school. You could have the same thing for your buses and have like a little section of all your buses and all those top down view of all the kids in there, and just kind of have that monitored.
What you're really saying is your buses deserve to be an extension of all of your same security systems that you already have in place, whether that's video, whether that's access control, whether that's monitoring bus routes, monitoring locations. There's a lot of technology that's being used right now for convenience as opposed to safety. But if we change the perspective, then we can start figuring out how to use that for safety. As an example, many parents were upset with kids not being picked up on time or being dropped off late, or buses driving past their bus stops too early, driven by parents and families. They developed technology that allows parents to track the buses and notify them that we are 5 minutes from your bus stop or what have you, from your stop. And so they can rush down and get little Susie on the bus. And
I knew you were going to use that name.
Little Johnny, whatever. We can get them to the bus stop on time without waiting around for too long, picking them up when they get dropped off without having to wait too long. So those are all convenience things. But if we can monitor them for that, we can also look at how do we monitor them for safety, i.e. the kid didn't get dropped off. And somebody looks and says, wait a second, they've already passed it. And I didn't get a notice that my child was left off or that they were even stopping at the bus stop. So where's my child at, right? So we can start working through those, because all we're dealing with is data now. Where's the bus? Hey, that bus shouldn't be going down that road. What's the deal? What's happening here? Those things can be adapted for. Sure, they were not purchased for that purpose, but we can, if we start looking at them and start asking the questions, are my buses on time? And we start looking and we find out that our buses are veering off the course. They're missing stops. Maybe something's wrong. Maybe I need to communicate with the bus driver, right?
Obviously there's reasons, right? There's time, there's money, whatever it is. I feel like a lot of these schools are still living in like 1990 something, like early 2000s.
Are you implying that those are the Stone Ages?
we like, you go talk to them and say, what are you using for a learning platform? And they kind of give you like, they look at you like you got three heads and they go, well, I'm like, let me rephrase. How do you communicate with your staff during an emergency? And they go, well, we use a PA system. Do you use anything else? And,
right.
No, and like all this stuff you've been talking about, it's like, it's almost very like dystopian, but it's like, it's very cool. Like we can do it. We have the technology to do everything you just said. So why are we not there? Why are schools not there?
You answer your own question.
I'm gonna say priorities.
Okay, that covers both of them, right?
Yes. So time,
time and money.
Money, yeah, time and money. You know. So like if we just like kind of paused on all their stuff and like really truly made student safety, teacher safety a priority, and implemented all these things, like would that always take over that much of the budget and time, or like once we implement it, could we kind of like reshift and because you obviously have to implement all this stuff and that takes some time and takes some money, but like there's upkeep of, if you do the whole Wi-Fi internet thing on the bus, like there's could be a monthly, yearly thing that you're gonna have to pay, I'm sure. But like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, do we?
Here's the deal.
It's not. I don't think it's always going to be as much of a burden as it would be initially.
Right. So
I'll say it that way.
So let me put it in the context of the schools. Every few years, they come up with new curriculum. They're going to teach what we've been teaching for 100 years. They're going to teach it differently.
Yeah.
Right? I hope that didn't sound too bad, but that's what it is, right?
You could have done a lot worse.
Could have.
Yeah.
But they understand that there's a lot of effort putting that all together, implementing it. There's a lot of effort, a lot of money, and so forth. But once they get it done, it becomes easier and easier, more routine, and it's just part of your day. Safety is the same thing. It costs a lot of money, costs a lot of time, effort, planning, and so forth. Once you get into it, I think we've talked about this many times. Once you get into it, it becomes second nature to you. It is not this big monster that we, a big obstacle that we have to navigate every day. It becomes second nature. So we talked about when I walk through a crowd and I assess everyone that I see. I'm looking for somebody who's going to do harm. I'm looking for somebody who's going to be out of place. I'm looking for something. When I started doing threat assessments for schools, they said, "How do you know all this stuff?" I says, "Because I do it every day." "What do you mean you do it?" I says, "When I'm walking down the street, I say hi to everybody. How you doing? Hey, what's going on?" I don't care. I don't know who they are. I want to see what their natural responses are. If they're shying away from me, if they're nervous, I'm looking and I'm assessing their behavior. If it's normal behavior, then have a good day. And off they go. I don't think about them again. If it's strange, I stop and observe. But it's second nature. And it becomes, when I go out to a restaurant, where do I sit? In the back with my face or my back to the wall, facing the entrance. My wife, to this day, my family, where do you want to sit?
Like, they should know by now. Where
they should, but they still ask because, maybe there's a different priority for me than just the entrance.
Maybe it's a new restaurant. It's got a weird layout and you want
weird layout, or maybe I want to be facing the bar as opposed to the entrance. Right.
Okay.
So they understand it. It's not that we have to go through this big training and implementation process. Okay, we're going into you take the left door. I'm going to go through the right door. It's not that. It's not this big monster. Because everything is just working through itself. And you just go, okay, good. Let's go in. Let's have a dinner and I'll watch. And it just becomes second nature. But they're not willing to put in that effort. And they're not really willing to make that priority. But when we're talking about buses, it's just an extension of that. And almost every technology that we have in the classrooms can be transferable to the buses. So do our buses have the ability to set off an alert? People are saying lockdown, right? When I say an alert, they're talking about lockdown, secure, hold, evacuate, shelter. Can they do that?
Maybe a more confined space, but yeah.
But there are reasons and procedures to do all of those in a bus. Do your bus drivers know that? And if they do, because they're remote, they know what they need to do. So they're not notifying all the other buses that are out there, hey, lock down your bus, because they're nowhere near each other. But what they are doing is notifying the school, I have a problem that is significant enough that I had to lock it down and we're hiding. Maybe somebody's taking shots at the bus. Maybe there's a police activity, they're in the midst of a high risk stop of a bank robber or a murder suspect or something like that, right? Do we evacuate buses? Yes, we do. We do it all the time. Wouldn't it be nice if the bus driver just had a button that says evacuation and it comes from the bus driver? And so they know, oh, this isn't good. Why are they evacuating? Well, the bus is on fire. The brakes got hot and it's on fire. So we have an issue, right? Can we pinpoint where that bus is when we send an alert? Absolutely. Where are you? I'm where that big red pin is on your map.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, we're sending people your way. Do you have control of your kids? Yes. We're all, off to the side, 100 yards behind it, but we're stuck. The bus itself stopped in traffic. So you're going to need police, you're going to need fire. We're likely going to need some kids, some medical services because some of the kids got some smoke inhalation, what have you. But how do you communicate that if all you have is a bus driver who has no radio, maybe a radio back to the transportation depot or office or whatever facility, and hoping that somebody's going to be there on the other line?
Yeah.
Right? There are so many things that bus driver has to take care of, just like teachers. Teacher sees an armed subject in the hall, presses the button, but now they have some priorities. They don't want to call 911, right? They want somebody else to call 911. They want something else to be escalated to 911 to know that something's happening. Same with the bus drivers. And the difference between the bus drivers and the schools in that situation is the bus drivers, when they remove the kids from the bus, they're not contained. So the bus driver has to corral all these kids. They're not in a recess yard with a 6-foot fence all the way around it. They're not at a stadium. They're out in traffic. They're in a neighborhood. So now they have to, these 40, 50, 60 kids, depending on the size of the bus, they have to corral all these kids who are likely scared what's going on. And parents are going to start worrying, where are my kids? It says the bus is stopped in the middle of 5th and Lafayette. And why has it been there for an hour? What's going on? Right? So those are things that we can take care of with technology. Click the link for the camera. Ooh, there's flames there. There's smoke there. We're getting the kids out. That type of stuff. So we understand, as administrators, we understand what's going on. Right? So here, the bottom line is you have to include buses and the technology into your safety plan, just like you are with your regular safety plans for the classrooms. No different at a minimum. There are some differences in how you respond to those, how you prevent, and so forth. So you get back to that Wi-Fi situation. What if a kid's being bullied on the bus? How do they report that? And if somebody gets a report of a fight, can you click on that camera and see what's happening? And so that when you bring it in, the bus in, and the bus driver fills out his reports and sends it to whomever they fill that out to, now they have evidence. They can sit back and say, okay, little Johnny was picking on little Susie or little Billy or what have you. But I will guarantee you that just about anything and everything that is happening on your campus is happening on that bus. You have this bus, this 40-foot bus or whatever. There's 50 or 60 kids on that bus.
Is there really that many kids on a bus?
Can be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
for one bus driver.
So if you have 10 rows of seats that hold 4, because you have 2 seats on each side.
Oh yeah, okay.
So that's 40 people right there.
Wow.
Right? So
the heck.
But you'll understand. Well, you won't understand this. You tell me do you think there's a hierarchy on where you sit in that bus?
Well, I know there is.
There is.
Yes. Yeah. I've never had to experience the hierarchy.
All right, that's right. Not even when you played soccer? When you
No,
traveled?
no, we were a pretty good team.
Okay.
It didn't matter where we sat.
Yeah. But there's a hierarchy based upon what?
Age,
Age, grade,
popularity,
popularity,
popularity is probably the biggest one I would
right?
guess.
Hierarchy determined by a position of power. Whatever that power is, it's determined by power. And when you determine behavior by power, what is that? Bullying.
Yeah.
When you exert your power over somebody's behavior, it's bullying. If you say, I just want to sit with my friend, okay. But if you want to say, I'm sitting here because you're a first grader and I'm a third grader or I'm a sixth grader, and if you want to sit here, I'm going to beat you up. That's bullying.
Yeah.
You giggle, but that's
Premeditated bullying.
That's right. But it's all part of it. They gained
Yeah.
that position by being the popular kid, by being a non-popular kid cannot just walk back to the back seat and say, I'm sitting here without causing some sort of issue.
Yeah.
Right?
It's interesting because like the group of kids on a school bus is probably going to be different than the group of kids that you'd find in a classroom,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a classroom you could have the same grade ish, probably the same group of kids, but then the bus is based on their geographical location.
Right. And what else?
So
Efficiency. Right.
right.
So
So it's like you get two different groups of kids. So that's probably why you're gonna have two different
dynamics going on, right?
dynamics of the classroom and your bus. Like
Yeah.
you're introducing different kids. So
different elements to the
it's
equation.
interesting.
Right? Yeah. So I'll give you an example. When I was going to school way back in the day, I lived in a community, but the school was not in that community. The elementary schools were, but the junior high or middle school and the high school were not. So that community didn't have enough kids to support either one of those schools. So they had to transport us via bus from our community to another community. When they picked me up to go to middle school, they also picked up all of the high schoolers.
Mm.
So we had middle school and high schoolers. And I was
now you're really mixing things up.
Right. I mean, huge maturity difference, huge physical difference between a seventh grader and a senior in high school. I was bullied almost my entire time on the bus because I was a big middle schooler. And the high schoolers, a couple in particular, would just want to show, look at, you may be a big kid in middle school, but you're not in high school. It's putting those dynamics together. And I had no way to report it. I had no way to avoid it because all of the high schoolers were in the back. They had to pass me getting on and off the bus.
So they make some remark as they go by you. And
yeah, one kid in particular, popular football player, would slap the back of my head every time.
Oh my gosh.
Every time getting off the bus.
I take that maybe once or twice.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do, right? It's that split second. It's just you call him an idiot, and you want to fight. Not worth fighting about. Everything that happens at a school setting, the actual building, happens on a bus. So take that and take the steps necessary to integrate all of that stuff into your bus. If you are just saying, okay, they're no longer my problem, they're on the bus, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. When you think of it this way, for every one of those kids in the morning, the bus is the entrance to the school. The first person from the school, the first school employee they're going to see every day is that bus driver. The last person from the school they're going to see every day, the bus driver. Are we training our bus drivers to look for concerning behaviors? Differences in appearance, differences in what they're doing, how they're behaving, are they depressed, those types of things. Are they trained to, one, observe it, how to report it, how to create a positive relationship there, and all of that stuff. When we talk about, and this was part of the conversation with the subject in the Appalachia High School shooting, right? Because he rode the bus in. He got onto that bus with a weapon. That becomes the mode of transportation. Let's address that.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.